He came home earlier and found his wheelchair-bound son lying on the floor, trembling and covered in dirt. In front of the defenseless child, the stepmother only watched, cold, as if pain were a deserved punishment. The scene dismantled the theater of perfection and revealed the cruelty hidden behind luxury. If you were touched by this beautiful story of resilience and love, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Continuing. The pristine lawns of Westbrook Manor glistened under the afternoon sun. Located in Greenwich, Connecticut, this sprawling estate was the crown jewel of Fairfield County, where old money met new technology in a display of understated wealth. The sound of clinking champagne glasses and polite laughter floated through the air as Mason Parker, tech mogul and founder of Parker Tech Solutions, turned his Tesla into the private driveway, hours earlier than expected. He had cut his Silicon Valley business trip short, eager to surprise his 7-year-old son Tyler with the special edition Star Wars Lego set he'd managed to get his hands on. Mason smiled, picturing the boy's face lighting up. These moments had become rare since the accident, and Mason was determined to create more of them. As he approached the mansion, Mason noticed several luxury vehicles parked near the entrance. Victoria must be hosting another one of her charity events, he thought. His second wife had a talent for social gatherings that benefited both worthy causes and their social standing. At least, that's what he had believed until today. Mason parked away from the main entrance, deciding to slip in through the garden to surprise Tyler in his room. The boy usually retreated there during Victoria's elaborate functions. As he rounded the corner of the immaculately landscaped garden, the gift bag dangling from his fingers, Mason heard something that made his blood run cold, a child's desperate plea. "Please, Victoria, I just want my chair back." "I can't get up." Mason froze. The voice belonged to Tyler, but it wasn't coming from his bedroom. Following the sound, Mason stepped through a row of perfectly trimmed hedges to a secluded section of the garden, hidden from the view of the party guests. The scene that unfolded before him would be forever seared into his memory. Tyler lay on the damp grass, his small hands clawing at the earth, trying to pull himself toward his wheelchair, which had been deliberately moved several feet away. The boy's face was streaked with dirt and tears, his khaki pants soiled from the ground, and his carefully combed hair disheveled. Standing above him, perfectly poised in a cream designer dress, was Victoria. Her arms were crossed, her expression cold and irritated as she looked down at the struggling child. "I told you to stay in your room during my fundraiser," Victoria said, her voice laced with contempt rather than the warmth she displayed in public. "Mrs. Henderson asked about you, and I had to make excuses. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was?" "I just wanted to see the party," Tyler whimpered. "Please, my arms hurt. I can't reach my chair." Victoria glanced at the wheelchair with calculated indifference. "Maybe next time you'll listen when I tell you something. This is my event, Tyler. You know the rules." The gift bag slipped from Mason's fingers, landing with a soft thud on the manicured lawn. In that instant, the perfect life he thought he had crafted after Emily's passing crumbled like a house of cards. The devoted stepmother, the supportive wife, the woman who had seemed so understanding of his grief and Tyler's trauma, it had all been a carefully constructed facade. "What the hell is going on here?" Mason's voice cut through the air like thunder. Victoria spun around, her eyes widening with shock. The mask of cruelty she had worn seconds before instantly transformed into one of concern. "Mason, you're home early," she gasped, quickly moving toward Tyler. "I was just helping Tyler practice his upper body strength exercises. Dr. Matthews said it's important to build his arm muscles." But Mason had seen enough. He rushed past Victoria, shoving her aside as he reached his son. Tyler's arms immediately wrapped around his father's neck, his small body trembling with relief. "Dad," the boy whispered, burying his face in Mason's shoulder. "You came back. I'm here, buddy." "I'm right here," Mason murmured, carefully lifting Tyler into his arms. The boy was lighter than he remembered, another realization that pierced his heart. Had he been so absorbed in his company that he'd failed to notice his son wasting away under his own roof? Victoria hovered nearby, her perfectly manicured hands fidgeting with her diamond bracelet. "Mason, you're misunderstanding the situation. Tyler needs to learn independence. Dr. Matthews suggested—" "Stop lying." Mason's voice was deadly quiet. "I heard everything. I saw everything. A commotion from the main garden interrupted them, as Margaret, the housekeeper who had been with the family since before Tyler was born, appeared with a tray of refreshments. The older woman froze at the scene before her, the tray nearly slipping from her hands. "Mr. Parker, I didn't know you were home," she exclaimed, her eyes darting between Mason holding Tyler, the abandoned wheelchair, and Victoria's increasingly flustered expression. "Margaret," Mason said, his voice strained with controlled fury, "please take Tyler inside, get him cleaned up, and stay with him." The housekeeper nodded, setting the tray down on a nearby garden table. As she approached to take Tyler, the boy clung tighter to his father. "It's okay, Tyler," Mason assured him, gently transferring him to Margaret's care. "I'll be right behind you. I just need to talk to Victoria for a minute." As Margaret carefully carried Tyler away, retrieving the wheelchair with her free hand, Mason turned to Victoria. The woman who had shared his bed, his home, his life for the past 2 years, now seemed like a complete stranger. "How long?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Victoria straightened her posture, her initial shock giving way to defiance. "I don't know what you mean. How long have you been treating my son like this? How long, Victoria?" The distant sounds of the fundraiser created a surreal backdrop to the unraveling of Mason's world. Somewhere behind those walls, people were sipping champagne in honor of a children's hospital charity that Victoria had organized with such apparent passion. "You don't understand the pressure," Victoria hissed, dropping the caring facade entirely. "Do you know what it's like to be stuck with a child who needs constant attention, who reminds everyone of your precious Emily every time they look at him? I've given up my life to play mommy to a broken child while you're off playing tech genius." Mason felt his hands trembling with rage. "Tyler is not broken. He's a child who lost his mother and the use of his legs in the same accident. He's a child I trusted you to love." "Love?" Victoria laughed, the sound brittle and cold. "You never loved me, Mason. I was a replacement, a caretaker, someone to manage your home and raise your son while you built your empire. Well, surprise, I didn't sign up to be a nurse to a crippled—" Mason's sharp intake of breath cut her off. Don't you dare finish that sentence." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You have exactly 1 hour to pack your things and leave my house. Whatever is left behind will be donated or destroyed. I don't care which." Victoria's face flushed with anger. "You can't do that. This is my home too. I have rights." "Check the prenup you signed," Mason replied coldly. "Section 12, paragraph 3 specifically addresses child welfare. My lawyers will be in touch, but rest assured, you'll be leaving with considerably less than you came with." A flash of uncertainty crossed Victoria's perfect features, quickly replaced by calculation. "You won't do this. Think of the scandal, the publicity. Parker Tech's stock will plummet when people find out you're throwing your grieving wife out on the street." Mason laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humor. "Grieving? Is that what you call this? And you think I care about stock prices right now?" He shook his head. "I have security footage of every inch of this property, Victoria. How many incidents do you think they'll find if I have them review the past year of recordings?" The color drained from Victoria's face. She hadn't known about the upgraded security system Mason had installed after a series of corporate espionage attempts against Parker Tech executives. Her silence confirmed his suspicions. This wasn't an isolated incident. 1 hour, he repeated, turning away from her. "And if you ever come near my son again, I'll make sure you regret it for the rest of your life." As Mason walked toward the house, he could feel Victoria's hateful gaze burning into his back. He knew this wasn't over. Women like Victoria didn't simply accept defeat and disappear. But right now all that mattered was Tyler. Inside, he found Margaret gently helping Tyler into clean clothes. The boy's eyes lit up when his father entered, but there was a wariness there that hadn't existed before, a caution that no 7-year-old should have to carry. "Is she going away?" Tyler asked quietly, as Mason sat beside him on the bed. The simple question broke something in Mason's heart. "Yes, buddy. Victoria is leaving and she's not coming back. Because of me?" The guilt in those 3 words made Mason realize just how deeply the psychological damage ran. "No. Tyler, never because of you." Mason gathered his son into his arms, feeling the fragile shoulders beneath his hands. Victoria made bad choices. She hurt you, and that's never okay. I'm the one who should be sorry. I should have been here. I should have known." Tyler leaned against his father, exhaustion evident in every line of his small body. "I tried to be good, Dad. I tried not to be a bother." "You are never ever a bother," Mason said, fiercely fighting back tears. "You're my son, and from now on it's going to be just us. I promise I'll do better." As Tyler eventually drifted into a troubled sleep, Mason remained by his side, watching the gentle rise and fall of his chest. Outside, he could hear Victoria's shrill voice ordering the guests to leave, the confused murmurs of the departing crowd, and the slam of drawers and closet doors as she packed. Margaret quietly entered the room, her usually warm face tight with anger. "Mr. Parker," she said softly, "there's something you should know." Mason gently eased himself away from Tyler, careful not to wake him. "What is it, Margaret?" The housekeeper twisted her hands in her apron. "This wasn't the first time. Mrs. Parker, Margaret's voice faltered. "She's been cruel to Tyler for months now. I wanted to tell you, but she threatened to have me deported. My family depends on this job and my visa." Mason felt sick. "You don't need to explain, Margaret. This isn't your fault." He placed a reassuring hand on the woman's shoulder. "But I need to know everything now. Every detail." As Margaret began to speak, Mason's resolve hardened. Victoria wouldn't simply walk away from this situation. She would pay for what she had done to his son. And Mason would ensure that Tyler never suffered at anyone's hands again, even if it meant giving up everything he had built to focus solely on healing his broken family. 2 years earlier, the Parker family had been the embodiment of the American dream. Mason, a brilliant software engineer turned entrepreneur, had built Parker Tech from a small startup in his garage to a billion-dollar company revolutionizing artificial intelligence. His wife Emily, a pediatric physical therapist with a heart of gold, had dedicated her career to helping children with mobility challenges. Their son Tyler was a bright, energetic 5-year-old who inherited his father's analytical mind and his mother's compassion. They lived in a modest home in Greenwich back then, choosing to invest in experiences rather than excessive luxury. Weekends were spent building science projects, exploring local parks, or sailing on their small boat along the Connecticut coastline. Though Mason's work occasionally demanded late nights and business trips, he always made time for what Emily called the Parker family adventures. "Life isn't measured in lines of code or bank statements," Emily would often remind Mason when work threatened to consume him. "It's measured in moments like these." She would gesture to Tyler's laughter as they chased each other through autumn leaves, or the peaceful expression on the boy's face as he fell asleep between them during movie nights. Everything changed on a rainy Tuesday in October. Mason had been in California, negotiating a major partnership deal that would eventually make Parker Tech a household name. Emily and Tyler were driving home from his kindergarten soccer practice when a truck driver fell asleep at the wheel, crossing the center line and colliding with their SUV. The accident left Emily with injuries too severe for survival, and Tyler with spinal trauma that paralyzed him from the waist down. By the time Mason made it to the hospital, Emily was gone and his son was unconscious, surrounded by machines and uncertain prognoses. The following months blurred together in a haze of grief, guilt, and overwhelming responsibility. Mason stepped back from day-to-day operations at Parker Tech to focus on Tyler's recovery, moving through the motions of existence rather than truly living. He converted their home to accommodate Tyler's needs, hired the best physical therapists, and learned everything he could about spinal cord injuries and pediatric trauma. But nothing prepared him for the emotional toll. Tyler withdrew into himself, his once exuberant personality dimmed by loss and physical limitations. Nightmares plagued the boy's sleep, and during waking hours, he would often sit silently staring at photos of Emily, his small fingers tracing her face. "I want Mommy to help me with my exercises," he'd say whenever Mason attempted the physical therapy routines. "She knows how to make them not hurt." Each word was a dagger to Mason's heart, a reminder of his own inadequacy and the irreplaceable void Emily's absence had created. He hired round-the-clock nurses and caretakers, but none could provide the emotional connection Tyler desperately needed. Mason found himself drowning in a sea of parental incompetence. uncertain how to reach his son through the fog of their shared grief. 6 months after the accident, Victoria Chambers entered their lives like a lifeline thrown to drowning survivors. She had been hired as an event coordinator for a Parker Tech charity gala benefiting spinal cord research. Elegant, efficient, and seemingly compassionate, Victoria took one look at the disheveled widower struggling to balance his company and his son's care, and stepped seamlessly into the role of savior. "You're burning yourself out," she told Mason one evening, after finding him asleep over medical journals in his home office. "Tyler needs stability, not a father who's stretched so thin he might snap." Victoria began by organizing Mason's chaotic household, creating schedules that allowed him to be present for Tyler's important moments, while still maintaining his necessary business commitments. She hired more appropriate staff, found specialists with innovative approaches to Tyler's therapy, and somehow managed to coax small smiles from the withdrawn child. "You have a gift with him," Mason remarked one evening, watching as Victoria helped Tyler create a science project about planets. It was the first time he'd seen his son engaged in something that wasn't medical or therapy-related in months. Victoria smiled, her blue eyes reflecting genuine warmth, or what Mason believed was genuine at the time. "He's a special boy who's been through too much. He deserves people who see his potential, not just his limitations." The transition from professional relationship to personal one happened gradually. Victoria began staying for dinner, then weekend outings, creating the semblance of normalcy that both Mason and Tyler craved. When she suggested moving into the guest house to be more available for Tyler's night terrors, Mason didn't object. And when 3 months later, she gently suggested that perhaps Tyler needed a mother figure rather than a revolving door of caretakers, the idea didn't seem preposterous. "I'm not trying to replace Emily," Victoria assured him during a quiet dinner after Tyler had gone to bed. "No one could. But Tyler needs feminine energy in his life, and you need someone to share this burden with." They were married in a private ceremony 6 months after meeting. Tyler served as ring bearer, navigating his wheelchair down the aisle with careful determination. Mason interpreted his son's solemn participation as acceptance, missing the resignation that had replaced the boy's earlier enthusiasm about Victoria. With Victoria officially installed as Mrs. Parker, changes came swiftly to the household. The modest family home was sold, and construction began on Westbrook Manor, a property Victoria insisted would better accommodate Tyler's needs while providing the appropriate setting for the social obligations that came with Mason's position. "Image matters in this world," she explained as she reviewed architectural plans that seemed more focused on entertaining spaces than accessibility features. "Tyler will thank us when he's older and understands the importance of connections and first impressions." As Parker Tech continued its meteoric rise, Mason found himself increasingly pulled back into the corporate world. Victoria encouraged this, assuring him that she had Tyler's care well in hand and that his business success was ultimately for their son's benefit. Margaret, their longtime housekeeper who had moved with them to the new estate, occasionally attempted to raise concerns about Tyler's diminishing spirits, but Victoria was always quick to dismiss them. "Children with trauma often have adjustment periods," she would explain smoothly, usually within Tyler's hearing. "The doctors say we shouldn't coddle him. It only reinforces dependent behaviors. Margaret means well, but she doesn't understand the psychological aspects." In truth, Mason was partly relieved to retreat into work. The corporate world offered clear problems with definable solutions, unlike the murky waters of parenting a traumatized child. Each time he returned home from business trips, Tyler seemed slightly more withdrawn, but Victoria always had plausible explanations: a difficult therapy session, a medication adjustment, or simply a bad day that many children with disabilities experienced. "You can't expect linear progress," she would say, placing a comforting hand on Mason's arm. "The specialist says these setbacks are normal." If Mason noticed that these specialists Victoria cited were rarely present for his own questions, he didn't dwell on it. If Tyler's original medical team had been gradually replaced with professionals of Victoria's choosing, he told himself it was for greater convenience and better care. If his son's eyes no longer lit up when Victoria entered the room, He attributed it to the complexity of blended families and the ongoing process of grief. The truth remained carefully concealed behind closed doors, away from Mason's distracted gaze and buried beneath Tyler's learned silence. What Mason didn't see were the silent meals Tyler ate alone while Victoria dined with friends. He didn't witness the accidents where Tyler was left stranded without his wheelchair as punishment for minor infractions like speaking too loudly during Victoria's phone calls or asking for his father when he was working. He wasn't present when Victoria systematically isolated Tyler from the household staff, who showed him genuine affection, threatening their employment if they became too attached to the boy. Most crucially, Mason never saw the calculated transitions between Victoria's true nature and the loving stepmother persona she adopted whenever he was present or likely to walk in. She maintained impeccable timing, transforming from cruel guardian to devoted caretaker in the seconds between hearing Mason's car in the driveway and his key in the door. Tyler had learned early in Victoria's reign not to complain to his father. His first attempts had been met with Victoria's smooth explanations about a child's tendency to exaggerate or misunderstand adult intentions. When Mason had gently questioned Victoria rather than immediately believing his son, something broke in Tyler's trust. The subsequent lessons Victoria delivered when they were alone again ensured his continued silence. "Your father works so hard for you," she would tell him, her voice soft but edged with threat. "Every time you make up stories about me, it breaks his heart and distracts him from important work. Is that what you want? To hurt your daddy even more after he's already lost your mum?" For a 7-year-old already carrying the weight of survivor's guilt, these manipulations were devastatingly effective. Tyler retreated further into himself, creating an inner world where his mother still lived and where he could walk, run, and play like before. He spoke less, ate less, and participated in therapy sessions with mechanical compliance rather than hope for improvement. Margaret watched this transformation with growing alarm. As the one staff member who had known the family before the accident, before Victoria, she recognized the systematic destruction of Tyler's spirit. But her precarious immigration status, which Victoria had discovered and exploited, kept her silent until that fateful day when Mason came home early and saw with his own eyes what had been happening under his roof. Now, as Mason sat beside his sleeping son, listening to Margaret's trembling recitation of Victoria's cruelties, the weight of his failure crushed him. He had one job, to protect his child, and he had not only failed, but actively enabled the person causing harm. "I'll need to record your statement," he told Margaret quietly, careful not to disturb Tyler. "And I'll have my lawyers address your immigration concerns immediately. You've been part of this family longer than—" He couldn't bring himself to say Victoria's name. "Your family, Margaret. I should have listened to you sooner." Downstairs, the sounds of Victoria's hasty departure continued, punctuated by the occasional crash of something being thrown in anger. Mason knew that Tyler's healing and his own redemption would only begin once she was truly gone from their lives. What he didn't yet realize was how desperately Victoria would fight to maintain her grip on the wealth and status she'd schemed so methodically to obtain. Victoria's departure from Westbrook Manor was anything but quiet. As the remaining guests from her charity event witnessed her being escorted off the property by security, rumors spread through Greenwich's elite circles like wildfire. By nightfall, Mason's phone was flooded with messages from concerned friends, business associates and board members, all seeking explanation for the dramatic scene that had unfolded on the perfectly manicured lawn. Mason ignored them all, focusing entirely on Tyler. He spent the night in his son's room, sleeping in an uncomfortable armchair beside the bed, unwilling to leave the boy alone even for a moment. When Tyler woke screaming from nightmares, Mason was there immediately, holding him close and whispering reassurances until the trembling subsided. "She can't hurt you anymore," he repeated like a mantra, as much for himself as for Tyler. "I promise, buddy. Never again." As dawn broke over the estate, Mason made 2 calls. The first was to Daniel Reynolds, his closest friend since college and Parkatech's chief operating officer. The second was to Olivia Bennett, the formidable attorney who had helped him build his company from the ground up. I need you to take over completely, Mason told Daniel, his voice rough from a sleepless night. Indefinite leave of absence starting immediately. Daniel, who had been the best man at Mason's wedding to Emily and Tyler's godfather, didn't hesitate. Consider it done. Is Tyler okay? Do you need me to come out there? Not yet, Mason replied, watching his son pick at the breakfast Margaret had prepared. We need some time, just the two of us. But I'll call when we're ready for visitors. The conversation with Olivia was more tactical. I want everything Victoria might try legally anticipated and blocked before she makes a move, he instructed. And I need a complete overhaul of household staff, thorough background checks, multiple interviews, psychological evaluations, the works. What exactly happened, Mason? Olivia asked, her usually crisp voice softened with concern. Mason closed his eyes. The image of Tyler sprawled helplessly on the ground, still raw in his mind. She hurt my son Liv repeatedly, while I was too blind or too busy to see it. The silence on the other end was heavy with understanding. Olivia had lost her own sister to domestic violence years earlier. It was why she'd specialized in family law before Mason convinced her to join Parker Tech's legal team. I'll be there in an hour, she said finally. And Mason, this isn't your fault, but it was his fault. Every moment of neglect, every business trip that could have been postponed, every time he'd chosen to believe Victoria's smooth explanations over Tyler's withdrawn behavior, the guilt was crushing. As he helped Tyler with his morning routine, tasks that Victoria had delegated to hired nurses despite Tyler's clear discomfort with strangers assisting him, Mason catalogued each mistake he'd made since Emily's passing. Dad? Tyler's voice pulled him from his spiral of self-recrimination. Are you mad at me? Mason blinked back tears, focusing on his son's solemn face. Mad at you? Why would I be mad at you, buddy? Tyler fidgeted with the hem of his shirt, eyes downcast. Because Victoria left. She said you married her because I needed a mum, and now she's gone because I wasn't good enough. The raw hurt in those words nearly brought Mason to his knees. He carefully sat on the edge of the bathtub, bringing himself to eye level with Tyler in his wheelchair. Tyler James Parker, look at me, he said gently, waiting until his son's eyes reluctantly met his. Victoria left because she was cruel to you, and that is never ever okay. It had nothing to do with you not being good enough. You are perfect exactly as you are. Doubt clouded Tyler's expression. But she said, she lied, Mason interrupted firmly, about a lot of things. And I made a huge mistake believing her, instead of paying attention to what was really happening. That's on me, not you. Never you. A tentative hope flickered in Tyler's eyes, but Mason could see how deeply Victoria's psychological manipulation had wounded his son. This wouldn't be fixed with a single conversation, or even a dozen. It would take time, consistency, and professional help to undo the damage. By the time Olivia arrived, Mason had formulated a plan. The attorney listened carefully as he outlined his priorities: Tyler's emotional and physical recovery, legal protection from Victoria, and a complete restructuring of their lives to eliminate the toxic elements Victoria had introduced. I want to sell this place, he concluded, gesturing to the opulent mansion around them. It was Victoria's idea, every inch of it designed to impress other people. I want to go back to basics, something like our old house where Tyler was happy. Olivia made notes on her tablet, her expression carefully neutral. All doable, but it will take time. Victoria will fight the divorce, especially with the prenup provisions about child welfare. She'll claim you're slandering her, that you're the one who neglected Tyler while she provided care. Let her try. Mason's jaw tightened. I have Margaret's testimony, and I've already retrieved security footage showing multiple incidents. He'd spent the early morning hours reviewing recordings from the estate's comprehensive security system, each new discovery fueling his determination to protect Tyler from further harm. Good, Olivia nodded approvingly. What about Tyler's medical team? Are they people Victoria selected? Mason's stomach twisted with fresh guilt. Most of them. She gradually replaced Emily's colleagues with people she claimed were more advanced in their methods. We'll need to vet them all, Olivia made another note, and get independent evaluations of Tyler's current condition. The conversation was interrupted by Margaret, who appeared at the study door with Tyler beside her. Mr. Parker, The young man was hoping to show you something, she said with an encouraging smile toward Tyler. Tyler wheeled himself forward hesitantly. In his lap was a weathered sketchbook, Emily's art journal that Mason hadn't seen since before the accident. Tyler had been clutching a page torn from it, covered in colorful drawings of planets and stars. I found it under my mattress, Tyler explained quietly. Victoria took it away before, but Margaret helped me hide this page. Mason knelt beside the wheelchair, examining the drawing that Emily had created for one of Tyler's preschool science projects. You kept this all this time? Tyler nodded, his fingers tracing the constellations Emily had sketched. When I look at it, I remember how Mom and I used to watch stars from the deck of our old house. Victoria said I wasn't allowed to talk about Mom or the old house anymore. A fresh wave of anger surged through Mason, but he kept his expression gentle for Tyler's sake. You can talk about Mom whenever you want, buddy. And about our old house, and anything else that makes you happy. For the first time since Mason had returned home, a genuine smile tugged at Tyler's lips. Could we maybe look at stars again sometime? Like before? Absolutely, Mason promised, embracing his son carefully. Over Tyler's shoulder, he exchanged a glance with Olivia, who nodded in understanding. This moment of connection was precisely what they were fighting to preserve. The following days established new rhythms in the Parker household. Mason cancelled all business obligations indefinitely, despite the board's concerns about the company's direction without him. Daniel stepped up admirably, keeping Mason informed of essential developments, but respecting his need to focus on Tyler. Mason also began interviewing new medical specialists, this time accompanied by Dr. Sarah Chen, Emily's former colleague and close friend, who had initially treated Tyler after the accident. Victoria had dismissed Sarah early in her takeover, claiming the doctor's emotional connection to the family clouded her professional judgment. I was worried about him, Sarah admitted during her first visit back to examine Tyler. I tried reaching out several times, but Victoria always intercepted my calls. Eventually, the messages from your office made it clear my services weren't welcome. The thorough evaluation Sarah conducted revealed what Mason had feared. Tyler's physical therapy had been inconsistent and sometimes counterproductive under Victoria's selected specialists. Some of the boy's regression wasn't due to the severity of his injuries, but to inadequate care disguised as cutting-edge treatment. The good news is, it's not too late, Sarah assured Mason after reviewing Tyler's latest scans. With the right therapy program, Tyler could regain significantly more function than he currently has. His spinal cord wasn't completely severed. There's real potential here that hasn't been properly addressed. Hope, a sensation Mason had almost forgotten, bloomed in his chest. You hear that, Tyler? Dr. Chen thinks you might be able to improve a lot more with new exercises. Tyler glanced between his father and the doctor, caution evident in his expression. Will they hurt? The last doctor said it had to hurt to work. Sarah's face darkened momentarily before she composed herself, kneeling to Tyler's level. Some exercises might be challenging, but they should never cause real pain. That's not how good physical therapy works. As Sarah outlined a new treatment plan, Mason made silent promises to his son. No more absent parenting, no more trusting others to make decisions about Tyler's welfare, no more putting business before family. Every decision from now on would prioritize Tyler's well-being and happiness. The first test of this commitment came sooner than expected. 3 days after Victoria's departure, Mason received a call from Wesley Montgomery, Parker Tech's largest investor and a key board member. I need you back in the office. Mason, Montgomery stated without preamble. The Singapore deal is falling apart, and only you can salvage it. 3 days tops. In the past, Mason would have immediately packed his bags, trusting that Tyler would be fine in capable hands. Now he didn't hesitate in his response. I'm sorry, Wesley, but I'm unavailable. Daniel has full authority to renegotiate or even walk away if necessary. This is about Victoria, isn't it? Montgomery pressed. Look, whatever marital spat you're having, this isn't a spat, Mason interrupted coldly. This is about my son's welfare, which I've neglected for too long. Parker Tech will survive without me for a while. Tyler needs me here. After hanging up, Mason found Tyler in the garden, sitting in his wheelchair beside Margaret as she taught him how to prune roses. another activity Victoria had deemed unsuitable for him. The sight of his son engaged and interested, dirt smudging his small fingers as he carefully handled the garden shears under Margaret's watchful guidance, confirmed that Mason had made the right choice. That evening, as they shared a simple dinner that Mason had prepared himself, with considerable coaching from Margaret, Tyler asked the question that had clearly been weighing on him. "Dad, are you really staying home now? Don't you have to go back to work?" Mason set down his fork, giving the question the serious consideration it deserved. "I'll eventually need to go back for some things, but not like before. From now on, you come first, Tyler. Always." Tyler studied his father's face, searching for signs of insincerity or future disappointment. Finding none, he nodded slowly. "Mom would like that. She always said your best inventions happened when you were happy at home." The mention of Emily, offered voluntarily without fear of reprimand, marked a small but significant step forward. That night, Mason moved Tyler's bedroom furniture onto the enclosed patio that overlooked the garden, creating an impromptu stargazing spot reminiscent of their old home's deck. They fell asleep counting constellations. Tyler nestled securely against his father's side for the first time in years. What Mason didn't know as he drifted off beside his son was that across town, Victoria was already setting her revenge in motion. The facade of perfect stepmother might have crumbled, but her mask of victim was being carefully constructed with the help of Maxwell Richards, Parker Tech's most aggressive competitor and a man with a personal vendetta against Mason Parker. Maxwell Richards' corner office at Richtech Industries offered a panoramic view of Manhattan's skyline, but his attention was fixed solely on the woman seated across from him. Victoria Parker, soon to revert to Victoria Chambers, was even more striking in person than in the society pages where she'd reigned as Greenwich's most elegant hostess. Today, however, her usual poise was marred by barely contained fury. "He humiliated me," she said, manicured nails tapping against the glass desk separating them. "Had security escort me out in front of everyone who matters in Connecticut. Do you have any idea what that's done to my reputation?" Maxwell leaned back in his leather chair, studying her with calculated interest. At 52, he maintained the physique of a man 20 years younger, with silver-streaked dark hair and the sharp features that had graced numerous business magazine covers. What those glossy profiles failed to capture was the cold ambition that had driven him to build Richtech through methods that occasionally skirted ethical boundaries. "Reputation can be rebuilt," he replied smoothly. "What concerns me is what you're offering in return for my assistance." Victoria's red lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Everything you need to destroy Mason Parker. Access codes to Parker Tech's secure servers, details of the Singapore negotiations, prototype information for the neural interface they're developing. Information I could potentially obtain through other channels," Maxwell interrupted. "What makes your offer special, Mrs. Parker?" "Because I know his weakness." Victoria leaned forward. "Mason has abandoned Parker Tech to play devoted daddy. He's emotional, distracted, and making decisions based on guilt rather than business sense. The board is already restless. With the right pressure applied at the right points, everything he's built will crumble." Maxwell's interest visibly sharpened. 5 years earlier, Mason Parker had walked away from a partnership with Richtech that would have merged their companies, choosing instead to develop the revolutionary AI algorithm that had catapulted Parker Tech beyond Richtech's reach. The betrayal still rankled. "Tell me about the boy," he said abruptly. "Tyler, isn't it?" Victoria's expression hardened. "The crippled brat who ruined everything? Mason worships the ground he rolls on. Now that he's decided I was mistreating his precious son, he'll do anything to compensate, including neglecting the company he spent a decade building." Maxwell raised an eyebrow at her venom but didn't comment. Instead, he pressed a button on his desk phone. "Janet, have legal bring up the confidentiality agreement and ask Jeff from security to join us." He turned back to Victoria. "If we're going to do this, we'll do it properly. You'll sign an NDA, and then you'll tell my head of cybersecurity exactly how to access Parker Tech's systems." Victoria hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I want financial compensation as well. Mason's prenup will leave me with barely enough to maintain appearances for 6 months. You'll be well compensated if your information proves valuable," Maxwell agreed. But make no mistake, Mrs. Parker. If you're playing both sides or if your intel is outdated, our arrangement ends immediately, and I'll personally ensure Greenwich Society knows exactly who betrayed their golden boy's confidence. Back in Connecticut, Mason was experiencing his first full week as Tyler's primary caregiver. After years of delegating the daily routines to others, he was learning the intricate choreography of medications, therapy exercises, school lessons, and emotional support that his son required. The learning curve was steep and humbling. Mason, who could write complex algorithms in his sleep and negotiate multi-billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, found himself flummoxed by the proper technique for helping Tyler shower without triggering embarrassment. The exact temperature that made protein shakes palatable to a 7-year-old, and the delicate balance between encouraging independence and providing necessary support. "You're trying too hard," Margaret observed gently after witnessing Mason's third failed attempt to help Tyler transfer from his wheelchair to the specialized therapy mat. "He knows what works for his body. Let him guide you." The simple advice transformed their approach. When Mason began following Tyler's lead rather than imposing his own solutions, both their frustration levels decreased dramatically. Small victories accumulated. Tyler's first genuine laugh during an improvised water balloon fight in the garden, the successful completion of a full physical therapy routine without tears, an evening when Tyler voluntarily shared memories of Emily without prompting. Dr. Chen visited 3 times that week, each session revealing new possibilities for Tyler's recovery. "His upper body strength has been neglected," she explained to Mason after their latest evaluation. "And there's neurological response in his right leg that suggests potential for partial weight-bearing with the right support system." Hope, so long absent from the Parker household, began to take tentative root. Mason converted the mansion's formal dining room into a therapy space, installing specialized equipment that allowed Tyler to work on strengthening exercises throughout the day, rather than only during scheduled sessions. The rigid routine Victoria had imposed gave way to a more organic schedule that prioritized Tyler's energy levels and interests. One morning, while helping Tyler stretch, Mason's phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Security breach detected in R&D servers. Need to discuss ASAP." Mason glanced at Tyler, who was concentrating on reaching for his toes, and made a quick decision. "Hey, buddy, mind if I take a quick call while you finish this set?" "I'll be right over there by the window." Tyler nodded, determination etched on his small face. "I'm going to try for 20 seconds of stretch this time." "That's awesome, Ty," Mason said, giving his son's shoulder a gentle squeeze before stepping away to call Daniel. "What happened?" he asked without preamble when Daniel answered. "Someone accessed the Prometheus project files using your credentials," Daniel explained, referring to Parker Tech's most classified neural interface prototype. "Security caught it because the access came from an IP address in New York City, not Greenwich." Mason frowned. "I haven't logged into those servers in weeks." "Exactly. We've locked down the system and changed all your passwords. But we need to know if your devices are compromised or if someone else might have your login information." A cold realization washed over Mason. Victoria. She watched me work from home often enough, checked the timestamps against when she left the house. After hanging up with promises to implement additional security measures, Mason turned back to find Tyler watching him with an unsettlingly adult expression of concern. "Is something wrong at work, Dad?" Mason hesitated, torn between protecting Tyler from adult concerns and maintaining the honesty he'd promised. "There might be," he admitted finally. "But Daniel's handling it." Tyler nodded seriously. "Victoria used to watch you type your passwords. She said it was because she needed to help manage your schedule. But she took pictures with her phone when you weren't looking." The simple observation confirmed Mason's suspicions while raising new concerns about what else Victoria might have accessed. He made a mental note to have Daniel conduct a full security audit, then deliberately lightened his tone. "Thanks for telling me, Ty. That's really helpful. Now how about we take a break from exercises and head outside? I've been thinking about setting up a garden project that we could work on together." The genuine enthusiasm that lit up Tyler's face reinforced Mason's commitment to prioritizing his son's recovery over business concerns. Whatever Victoria was planning with his stolen credentials, Parker Tech's security team could handle it. Tyler's emotional security was his primary focus now. Unknown to Mason, the security breach was merely the opening gambit in Victoria and Maxwell's campaign. 3 days after their initial meeting, Victoria sat across from Eliza Howard, host of Greenwich Confidential, the region's most influential lifestyle podcast. "I'm so grateful you agreed to hear my side," Victoria said, dabbing carefully at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "These past weeks have been unbearable." Eliza leaned forward, recorder prominently displayed on the coffee table between them. At 45, she had built her reputation on exposing the scandals and secrets of Connecticut's elite, always managing to skirt the edge of libel while delivering content that kept her wealthy listeners enthralled. "Let's be clear about what we're discussing," Eliza said, her professional smile never wavering. "You're alleging that Mason Parker, CEO of Parker Tech and one of Forbes' most admired business leaders, emotionally abused you and is now using his son's disability as cover to smear your name." Victoria nodded, her expression a perfect blend of dignity and suffering. Mason's brilliance comes with a dark side. His perfectionism, his obsession with control. At work, people call him visionary. At home, those same traits made him increasingly cruel. "And you stayed because of Tyler. That poor child has lost so much already," Victoria's voice caught convincingly. After his mother's accident, Mason became even more distant, leaving Tyler's care entirely to others while he buried himself in work. "I was the only stability in Tyler's life. When I tried to encourage Mason to be more present as a father, he became resentful." Eliza made a note, her journalistic instincts sensing a narrative too perfectly crafted. "Sources say you were seen physically separating Tyler from his wheelchair during your last charity event." Victoria's expression shifted to practiced indignation. "That's a gross mischaracterization of what happened. Tyler's physical therapist had implemented a new strengthening regimen that involved controlled distance exercises. Mason walked in during one of these sessions and completely misunderstood what he was seeing. And the household staff who reportedly witnessed other incidents. Margaret has been with the family since before Emily's passing. Her loyalty is to Mason and Tyler, not the truth." Victoria leaned closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "What no one is discussing is Mason's increasing paranoia and erratic behavior. He's installed surveillance throughout the house, monitors everyone's movements, and has become obsessed with conspiracy theories about corporate espionage." The interview continued for another hour, with Victoria presenting herself as a devoted stepmother, wrongfully cast aside by an unstable tech genius who was using his wealth and influence to silence her. By the time Eliza left, she had enough material for a sensational episode, though whether she would present it as Victoria hoped remained to be seen. Across town, Maxwell Richards was meeting with Wesley Montgomery, the Parker Tech board member, who had attempted to summon Mason back to work. The two men were ostensibly discussing a charity golf tournament, but their conversation quickly turned to business as they settled into the private dining room at the Greenwich Country Club. "Mason's always been stubborn," Montgomery complained, signaling for another scotch. "But this complete abandonment of responsibility is unprecedented. The Singapore deal is hanging by a thread. Our stock has dipped 3 points since he announced his leave of absence. And now there's this security breach to deal with." Maxwell maintained a carefully neutral expression. "Fatherhood changes priorities. Perhaps Mason's decided Parker Tech isn't his legacy after all." Montgomery snorted. "Parker Tech is his life's work. He'll come to his senses once this domestic drama settles down." "And if he doesn't?" Maxwell asked, watching Montgomery's reaction closely. "The neural interface prototype alone is worth billions. If leadership remains unstable, shareholders will get nervous." The implication hung in the air between them. Montgomery studied his companion through narrowed eyes. "What exactly are you suggesting, Max?" "Nothing specific," Maxwell replied smoothly. "Just noting that Parker Tech's current situation creates opportunities for partnerships, for strategic investments, perhaps even for new leadership." The seed planted, Maxwell steered the conversation back to safer ground, but the calculation in Montgomery's expression suggested the message had been received. Phase 1 of Victoria's revenge was proceeding exactly as planned. Back at Westbrook Manor, Mason remained blissfully unaware of these machinations. He and Tyler had spent the afternoon adapting one of Emily's old vegetable garden plans for a raised bed that would be accessible from Tyler's wheelchair. The simple activity had prompted Tyler to share more memories of his mother, each recollection easier than the last. "Mom used to say tomatoes needed to be sung to," Tyler recalled, smiling as he helped Mason measure the lumber for their project. "She made up silly songs about each vegetable." "I remember," Mason chuckled. Her eggplant opera was particularly creative. These moments of connection were healing for both of them. With each passing day, Tyler grew more confident, more willing to express his needs and feelings. The nightmares decreased in frequency, and the shadows under his eyes gradually faded. But as Tyler flourished, Parker Tech faltered. Daniel's daily updates grew increasingly concerning. The Singapore negotiations had stalled completely. A scheduled product launch was delayed due to unexpected technical issues. Rumors of instability at the top were affecting employee morale. Mason listened to these reports with divided attention, one ear always attuned to Tyler's needs in the next room. He trusted Daniel implicitly, but couldn't summon the same passion for corporate challenges that had once consumed him. When Dr. Chen suggested a specialized therapy program in Boston that might accelerate Tyler's progress, Mason didn't hesitate to prioritize the opportunity, even though it meant missing an emergency board meeting. "You're the CEO," Montgomery reminded him sharply during a tense phone call. "Your obligation is to this company and its shareholders." "My obligation is to my son," Mason replied, watching through the window as Tyler proudly showed Margaret how he could now pull himself up to standing position using parallel bars. "Parker Tech has a strong leadership team that can function without me for a few weeks." "Weeks? Mason, we're talking about the future of everything you've built." "No," Mason said quietly. "We're talking about one aspect of what I've built. I'm looking at the most important part right now." As he ended the call, Mason was struck by how fundamentally his perspective had shifted. The company that had once been his primary identity now seemed like merely one component of a much more complex and meaningful life. Tyler's progress, both physical and emotional, had become the metric by which he measured success. What Mason didn't realize was that this transformation, while healing the broken bonds with his son, was creating vulnerabilities that Victoria and Maxwell were expertly positioned to exploit. The wheels they had set in motion were accelerating, drawing ever closer to the Parker family's newfound peace. The Boston Children's Hospital Rehabilitation Center stood as a beacon of innovation in pediatric physical therapy. Designed to resemble a colorful playground rather than a medical facility, its halls echoed with children's laughter, mixed with the determined grunts of young patients pushing their physical limits. For the past 2 weeks, this had been Tyler's second home as he participated in an intensive therapy program under Dr. Chen's supervision. Mason watched from the observation area as Tyler worked with Lisa, a specialized pediatric therapist whose gentle persistence had quickly earned his son's trust. Today they were practicing with the exoskeletal support braces Dr. Chen had recommended, cutting-edge technology that responded to the minimal neural signals still traveling through Tyler's damaged spinal pathways. "That's it, Tyler," Lisa encouraged as the 7-year-old gripped the parallel bars, the mechanical braces whirring softly as they supported his tentative weight shifting. "Feel how your right leg is taking more weight now? That's all you controlling the movement." Tyler's face was a study in concentration, sweat beading on his forehead as he focused on the nearly imperceptible muscle contractions that activated the support system. When he successfully took a small assisted step forward, his expression transformed into pure astonishment. Dad, look," he called out, turning toward the observation window with eyes bright with wonder. "I'm standing up by myself." Mason gave him an enthusiastic thumbs up, his throat too tight with emotion for words. These moments of breakthrough had become more frequent during their stay in Boston, each small victory building Tyler's confidence and determination. The boy who had once believed he would never progress beyond his wheelchair was now eagerly anticipating each therapy session, pushing himself harder each day. Dr. Chen joined Mason in the observation room, her clipboard tucked under one arm as she studied her young patient's progress. "His neural engagement is improving faster than I anticipated," she noted, her professional demeanor softening with genuine pleasure. The right leg especially is showing significant response. What does that mean long-term? Mason asked, unable to tear his gaze from Tyler, who was now attempting a second step with the therapist's guidance. It's still too early for definitive prognoses, Dr. Chen cautioned, but I'm increasingly optimistic that with continued therapy and the right adaptive equipment, Tyler might eventually manage short distances with forearm crutches or a walker. His upper body strength is developing nicely, which is crucial for alternative mobility methods. The possibility hung in the air like a tangible hope. Mason had learned to temper his expectations, to celebrate each tiny improvement rather than fixating on ultimate outcomes. But Dr. Chen's carefully measured optimism sent a surge of excitement through him nonetheless. He's happier, Mason observed quietly. Even if the physical progress stopped today, the change in his spirits these past weeks has been worth everything. Dr. Chen nodded, understanding the deeper truth in Mason's words. Children are remarkably resilient when they feel safe and supported. You've given him that foundation again. The therapist signaled that the session was ending, and Mason moved to help Tyler transition back to his wheelchair. The boy was flushed with exertion, but beaming with pride as he recounted every detail of his experience. Lisa says maybe next week we can try the outdoor mobility course if my strength keeps improving, he explained excitedly as they made their way through the hospital corridors toward the exit. They have different surfaces like gravel and grass and small ramps to practice on. That sounds awesome, buddy, Mason replied, marveling at the transformation in his son. The withdrawn, fearful child Victoria had cultivated was disappearing, replaced by a boy who once again looked toward the future with anticipation rather than dread. Their rental apartment near the hospital had become a comfortable temporary home, deliberately selected for its accessibility features and proximity to a small park, where Tyler could practice navigating various terrains in his wheelchair. Each evening, they settled into a routine of dinner. Mason's cooking skills were improving under Tyler's critical tutelage. Homework from the private tutor Olivia had arranged, and video calls with Margaret, who was overseeing the renovation of their former family home, the modest house where Tyler had spent his early years. The accessible bathroom is nearly complete, Margaret reported during their evening call, and the contractor finished installing the ramp and widening the doorways today. How's the garden looking? Tyler asked eagerly. They had decided to recreate Emily's vegetable garden as part of their return to simpler values, with raised beds designed for wheelchair access. Margaret turned her phone camera to show the prepared garden area. Ready for planting as soon as you get home. I've been starting some seedlings just like your mother used to do. After the call ended, Tyler grew unusually quiet, fidgeting with the edge of his blanket as Mason helped him prepare for bed. What's on your mind, Ty? Mason asked, recognizing the signs of his son's internal debate. Tyler hesitated, then looked up with serious eyes. Is Victoria really gone forever? She always said she'd be the only mom I'd ever have now, and that you needed her to take care of me because you were too busy. The innocent question revealed yet another layer of Victoria's psychological manipulation. Mason sat on the edge of Tyler's bed, choosing his words carefully. Victoria isn't coming back, and that's a good thing. She wasn't kind to you, and that's never okay, no matter what reasons she gave. And as for me being too busy, that was my mistake, one I won't make again. But what about Parker Tech? Don't you have to go back soon? Mason recognized the underlying fear, that this period of connection and attention was temporary, that the demands of business would eventually reclaim his focus. Parker Tech is important, he acknowledged, but not as important as you. I'll need to check in with the office sometimes, but we're figuring out a new balance that puts you first. Tyler seemed to consider this, his expression still troubled. Victoria told some of her friends that you only kept me around because you promised Mom, but that I was too much work and not normal enough for you to really want me. Each new revelation of Victoria's cruelty landed like a physical blow. Mason took a deep breath, fighting to maintain composure for Tyler's sake. That is absolutely not true. You're my son, and I love you more than anything in this world. Having you in my life is not a burden. It's the greatest gift I've ever received. The simple truth seemed to reach Tyler, who relaxed slightly against his pillows. I thought maybe she was lying about that too, but sometimes it's hard to know for sure. I understand, Mason said gently. Victoria told a lot of lies that got mixed up with truths, and that can be confusing. But anytime you're not sure, you can ask me directly, and I promise to tell you the honest truth. As Tyler finally drifted to sleep, Mason retreated to the apartment's small living room and opened his laptop for the first time that day. The backlog of emails was daunting, but one subject line immediately caught his attention. Board meeting emergency vote. Proxy required. The message from Olivia was brief but alarming. Montgomery's gathered support for a leadership review. Special board meeting scheduled for Friday. Need your proxy and explicit directions. Call me ASAP. Mason checked the time, nearly midnight on the East Coast, which meant it was only 9 p.m. in California, where Olivia was handling another case. He dialed her number, pacing the small living room as he waited for her to answer. I was about to call you, Olivia said, by way of greeting. Things are moving faster than anticipated. What exactly is Montgomery proposing? Mason asked, keeping his voice low to avoid waking Tyler. Officially, a temporary leadership restructuring during your personal leave of absence, Olivia explained. Unofficially, it's a power grab. He's convinced several key board members that your focus on Tyler represents abandoned responsibility rather than necessary family care. Mason felt a surge of betrayal. Wesley Montgomery had been one of his earliest investors, someone he had trusted with Parker Tech's vision from its inception. Who's supporting him? Jensen, Miller, and Watkins are definitely in his camp. Bronson and Zhang are with you. The others are wavering, especially after the Singapore deal collapsed. The Singapore partnership had been Parker Tech's planned entry into the Asian market, a crucial expansion that had been in negotiation for over a year. What happened with Singapore? Olivia's hesitation was telling. The official story is that our negotiators couldn't match Richtech's counteroffer. Unofficially, there are rumors that confidential details of our proposal were leaked, allowing Maxwell Richards to undercut us significantly. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Victoria's security breach, Maxwell's sudden competitive advantage, Montgomery's convenient timing. The coordination was too perfect to be coincidence. Victoria, Mason murmured. She's working with Richards. That's my assessment as well, Olivia confirmed. But proving it is another matter. What do you want me to do about the board meeting? Mason considered his options. He could fly back immediately to fight Montgomery's proposal in person, temporarily leaving Tyler in Boston with Dr. Chen and the therapy team. He could issue a proxy statement, reasserting his authority as founder and majority shareholder. Or he could take a more unexpected approach. Set up a video conference for the meeting, he decided. I won't leave Boston, but I want to address the board directly with Tyler present. It's time they understand exactly why my priorities have shifted. The following morning brought another complication. As Mason and Tyler were finishing breakfast, his phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Turn on CNBC now. Mason grabbed the remote and switched on the apartment's television, finding the business news channel just as the anchor was introducing a breaking story. Parker Tech shares are down 12% in pre-market trading following explosive allegations against CEO Mason Parker, the polished anchor announced. Greenwich socialite Victoria Chambers, Parker's estranged wife, has given an exclusive interview detailing what she describes as disturbing behavior from the tech mogul, including allegations of corporate surveillance, emotional abuse, and using his son's disability as a shield from business responsibilities. The screen cut to a video clip of Victoria, artfully composed in a modest blue dress, her expression a perfect blend of reluctance and conviction. I didn't want to come forward, she said solemnly, but when Mason began using Tyler's condition to justify erratic business decisions that affect thousands of employees and investors, I felt I had a responsibility to speak up. Mason quickly muted the television as he noticed Tyler watching with wide, confused eyes. Is Victoria on TV talking about us? The boy asked hesitantly. It looks that way, Mason acknowledged, mentally calculating how much Tyler had heard and understood. Sometimes when adults disagree, they don't handle it well. Victoria is saying things that aren't true because she's upset about having to leave our family. Tyler considered this with surprising maturity. Is she trying to hurt us again, just in a different way? That's very insightful, Ty. Yes, I think that's exactly what she's trying to do. Mason turned off the television entirely. But we're not going to let her upset us or change our plans. We have therapy this morning, and then I thought we might try that new adaptive sports program Dr. Chen mentioned. While Tyler seemed willing to set aside the disturbing television segment, Mason's mind raced with implications. Victoria's public attack, timed perfectly to impact Parker Tech's stock price just before the board's emergency meeting, suggested a level of strategic coordination that likely extended beyond personal revenge. Maxwell Richards' involvement seemed increasingly certain. Between Tyler's therapy sessions, Mason made a flurry of calls. Olivia was already preparing a legal response to Victoria's allegations. Daniel reported that employee morale was suffering, but that the core engineering team remained loyal. Sarah Chen agreed to adjust Tyler's therapy schedule to accommodate the video board meeting, understanding the importance of showing the board the reality of Tyler's progress and Mason's parental involvement. By Friday morning, Mason had developed a comprehensive strategy. Rather than merely defending against Victoria and Montgomery's coordinated attack, he would use the crisis as an opportunity to realign Parker Tech's leadership structure to better balance his dual responsibilities. The board meeting began at noon, with Mason and Tyler joining via secure video link from a private conference room at the Rehabilitation Center. Mason had explained to Tyler, in age-appropriate terms, why their participation mattered. "Some people think I can't be a good dad to you and run Parker Tech at the same time," he told his son. "We're going to show them that's not true. You don't need to say anything. Just having you there with me helps tell our story." As the board members' faces appeared on the screen, Mason noted their expressions ranging from supportive concern to barely concealed hostility. Montgomery sat at the head of the conference table in Parker Tech's headquarters, his position a visual statement of his ambitions. "Thank you for accommodating this virtual arrangement," Mason began, his tone professional but warm. "Before we address the formal agenda, I'd like to introduce someone important. This is my son Tyler, who's currently participating in a specialized therapy program here in Boston." Tyler gave a small wave, his shy smile visible to the assembled executives. The simple humanity of the moment created a subtle shift in the room's energy, reminding everyone that behind the corporate maneuvers and stock prices was a real family navigating genuine challenges. "I understand there are concerns about my current focus and Parker Tech's direction," Mason continued. "Rather than debate abstractions, I'd like to present a concrete proposal that addresses both my family responsibilities and the company's needs." He outlined a restructured leadership model. Daniel would be elevated to President and Chief Operating Officer, handling day-to-day operations with expanded authority. Mason would retain CEO responsibilities focused on strategic vision, product innovation, and key client relationships, with a modified schedule that accommodated Tyler's ongoing care. Additionally, Mason concluded, "I believe recent events suggest a need for enhanced security protocols and a thorough investigation into potential corporate espionage, particularly regarding the Singapore negotiations." Montgomery's expression darkened at the implication. "While your proposed restructuring has merit," he interjected smoothly, "it doesn't address the immediate confidence crisis created by your extended absence and the unfortunate publicity surrounding your personal situation." "You mean the carefully timed character assassination by my estranged wife?" Mason asked mildly. "The same estranged wife who was caught accessing confidential company servers just before our Singapore proposal was mysteriously undercut by Maxwell Richards." A murmur ran through the board members. Mason had deliberately avoided publicly connecting these dots until now, allowing Victoria and her allies to believe their coordination remained undetected. "That's a serious accusation," Montgomery said stiffly. "Do you have evidence?" "Our cybersecurity team has confirmed unauthorized access using my credentials from an IP address traced to Rich Tech's New York headquarters," Mason replied. "And I find it interesting that you and Richards were seen meeting at Greenwich Country Club the day before you called for this emergency session." The revelation landed like a bombshell. Several board members turned to Montgomery with questioning expressions, their earlier certainty visibly wavering. "Gentlemen, ladies," Mason continued into the sudden silence, I founded Parker Tech with a vision of technology that serves human needs. I failed to live by that principle in my own family, prioritizing corporate growth over my son's well-being. I won't make that mistake again, but neither will I abandon the company we've built together." He gestured to Tyler, who had remained quietly attentive throughout the discussion. "My son is showing me every day what courage and perseverance truly mean. The restructuring proposal before you allows me to honor my commitment to him while fulfilling my responsibilities to Parker Tech. I'm asking for your trust and support as we navigate this transition." The vote that followed was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Mason's restructuring plan was approved, with Montgomery and his two closest allies outmaneuvered by the remaining board members. As the meeting concluded, Mason felt a complex mixture of vindication and lingering concern. The immediate threat to his leadership had been neutralized, but Victoria and Maxwell Richards remained dangerous adversaries with unknown resources at their disposal. Tyler, sensitive as always to his father's emotions, waited until the video call ended before asking, "Did we win, Dad?" Mason smiled, ruffling his son's hair gently. "This round, yes. But the important victory happened weeks ago when we decided to be a real family again. Everything else is just details." As they left the conference room to return to the therapy center, Mason's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Margaret. "There's someone here you should talk to," she said without preamble. "Robert Wilson, Victoria's former assistant. He says he has information about her plans with Richards and something about compromising evidence they're planning to release next week." Robert Wilson sat nervously in the kitchen of the Parker family's original home, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. At 25, he had the polished appearance of someone who understood the value of presentation in the world of the wealthy. Tailored shirt, expensive watch, meticulously styled hair. But today, that carefully constructed facade was crumbling. His right leg bounced anxiously under the table as he waited for Mason's video call. Margaret stood nearby, her posture protective of the Parker family space, even as she offered the young man another refill. She had spent the past hour renovating Emily's garden while keeping a watchful eye on the unexpected visitor through the kitchen window. When Mason's face appeared on the tablet screen, Margaret had propped up on the kitchen counter. Robert straightened immediately, a reflexive response that spoke volumes about his professional conditioning. "Mr. Parker, thank you for speaking with me," he began, his voice steadier than his still trembling hands. "I understand your skepticism, given my association with Victoria." "Let's start with why you're here," Mason replied neutrally. His face on the screen revealed little, but the caution in his eyes was evident. Tyler was visible in the background, working with a therapist in the rehabilitation center's colorful gym. Robert took a deep breath. "Victoria is planning to release doctored recordings of you supposedly mistreating Tyler. She and Maxwell Richards have manipulated security footage from your home, editing segments together to create a false narrative that you were the abusive one while she was protecting Tyler." Mason's expression hardened. "That's a serious allegation. How do you know this?" "I helped them do it," Robert admitted, dropping his gaze momentarily before forcing himself to meet Mason's eyes again. "I have a background in video production before I became Victoria's assistant. She specifically hired me for my editing skills, although I didn't realize that was the reason until recently. And you're coming forward now because—" Robert's facade cracked further, revealing genuine distress beneath. "Because I saw the real footage before we manipulated it. I saw what she did to your son." His voice broke slightly. "My younger brother has cerebral palsy. Watching Victoria's treatment of Tyler, even secondhand through security recordings, I couldn't sleep afterward. I can't be part of this anymore." Mason studied Robert silently for a moment, assessing his sincerity. "What exactly are they planning?" "A major media blitz scheduled for Monday morning," Robert explained, visibly relieved to be sharing the information. "Victoria has already recorded interviews with 3 national morning shows, positioned as a brave whistleblower, exposing abusive behavior hidden behind tech wealth. The doctored footage will be released simultaneously across multiple platforms, timed to impact Parker Tech's quarterly earnings announcement." The calculated malice of the plan was breathtaking. If successful, it would devastate both Mason's personal reputation and Parkatech's market position in one coordinated strike. The timing with the quarterly announcement suggested inside information that could only have come from someone on the board, almost certainly Montgomery. Do you have proof of what they're doing? Copies of the original footage? Documentation of the plan? Mason asked, his mind already racing through potential countermeasures. Robert nodded, producing a flash drive from his pocket and holding it up for Mason to see. Everything I could gather without raising suspicions. Original footage showing Victoria's actual treatment of Tyler, emails between Victoria and Richards outlining their strategy, and a draft press release already distributed to media outlets under embargo. Mason turned slightly, checking on Tyler before continuing in a lower voice. Why should I believe you're not still working for them, trying to gain my trust to gather more information? It was the question Robert had clearly been anticipating. Because Victoria threatened my brother's care facility when I expressed concerns about the footage, he said quietly. Her exact words were, "Everyone has pressure points, Robert. Yours just happens to be in a wheelchair, too." I realized then that she's capable of targeting a disabled child to get what she wants, whether it's Tyler or my brother Michael. The specific cruelty described rang true to Mason's experience of Victoria, lending credibility to Robert's account. Still, caution was necessary. I'll have my security team contact you to verify the contents of that drive before I return to Greenwich, he decided. In the meantime, Margaret will show you to the guest house. I'd prefer you stay there rather than return to anywhere Victoria might find you. After ending the call, Mason immediately contacted Olivia and Daniel, conferencing them together to discuss this new development. While they spoke, he watched Tyler across the therapy room, proudly demonstrating his improving balance to another young patient. The sight of his son's growing confidence and generosity strengthened Mason's resolve to protect him from Victoria's latest attack. If Robert's information checks out, we need to go on the offensive, Olivia advised. Her preemptive statement with the real footage would undercut Victoria's entire narrative. Daniel was more cautious. Releasing footage of Victoria abusing Tyler means exposing him to public scrutiny during an already difficult time. Is that what's best for him? The question cut to the heart of Mason's dilemma. Every protective instinct urged him to shield Tyler from further trauma, yet allowing Victoria's false narrative to spread unchallenged could create a different kind of long-term damage. I need to talk to Tyler about this, Mason decided. He's the one most affected, and I promised not to make decisions about his life without including him. When Tyler's therapy session ended, Mason found a quiet corner of the hospital garden where they could speak privately. Explaining the situation in age-appropriate terms was challenging, but Mason had learned that underestimating Tyler's capacity to process difficult truths only created more confusion later. Victoria and some people who don't like our company are trying to tell lies about us, he explained carefully. They changed some videos to make it look like I was the one who was mean to you, not Victoria. Tyler frowned, processing this information. But that's not what happened. Why would people believe that? Sometimes people believe things that aren't true if they're presented in a convincing way, Mason said. We have the real videos that show what actually happened. But if we share those to prove the truth, it means other people would see how Victoria treated you. That might feel uncomfortable or embarrassing. Tyler was quiet for a long moment, idly running his finger along the wheelchair armrest in the way he did when deep in thought. Would people see me crying? And on the ground when she took my chair away? Some of that, yes, Mason answered honestly. We could blur your face to protect your privacy, but it would still be our family's private moments becoming public. Tyler's next question surprised him. Would it help other kids like me? If people saw what Victoria did? The question revealed a compassion and perspective beyond his years, reminiscent of Emily's innate empathy. Mason considered his response carefully. It might help other children in similar situations if adults understand better how this kind of behavior hurts kids. But that's not your responsibility, Tyler. We can find other ways to handle this that don't involve sharing those difficult moments. Tyler nodded, his expression solemn. I think we should show the real videos, he said finally. Victoria said nobody would believe me if I told about the bad things because I'm just a kid and she's a grown-up. But the videos show the truth. The simple wisdom in those words tightened Mason's throat with emotion. "Are you sure, buddy? Once those videos are public, we can't take them back." "I'm sure," Tyler said with unexpected firmness. "And Dad, I want to help tell our story, not just with the videos, but maybe I could talk to someone too, to explain what it was really like." Mason felt simultaneous pride in his son's courage and heartache that such courage was necessary. "Let me think about that part," he said gently. "Talking to the media would be very different from just releasing the videos. For now, let's focus on getting back home and making sure the truth comes out about the videos." That evening, after Tyler had gone to sleep, Mason received confirmation from his security team that Robert's flash drive contained exactly what he had claimed, and more. In addition to the doctored footage Victoria planned to release, there were hundreds of hours of original security recordings showing her systematic mistreatment of Tyler over months, growing progressively worse as she became more confident in her control of the household. There were also emails between Victoria and Maxwell Richards discussing their Parker problem in explicit terms, including references to Montgomery's involvement in providing internal Parker Tech information. Most damning was a document outlining their coordinated strategy to destroy both Mason's personal reputation and Parker Tech's market position, with the end goal of forcing a distress sale of the company to Rich Tech at a fraction of its value. Armed with this evidence, Mason, Olivia, and Daniel formulated a counter-strategy. Rather than waiting for Victoria's media blitz, they would release a carefully edited compilation of the authentic footage to selected journalists, accompanied by a statement explaining the context and emphasizing their reluctance to make such private matters public. Simultaneously, they would provide evidence of corporate espionage to federal authorities, focusing on the business conspiracy aspects rather than the personal vendetta. The timing would need to be precise, late enough to prevent Victoria from adapting her strategy, but early enough to control the narrative before Monday's planned media assault. "We should be prepared for significant backlash," Olivia warned during their late-night strategy session. "Victoria has spent years cultivating her public image in Greenwich society. Some people will defend her regardless of evidence." Mason nodded grimly. "I understand the risks. My priority is protecting Tyler and the company, in that order. If my reputation takes a hit in the process, I can live with that." The next morning brought unexpected complications. Tyler woke with fever and increased pain in his legs, a not uncommon occurrence during intensive therapy, but concerning nonetheless. Dr. Chen ordered additional tests and recommended postponing their planned return to Connecticut until Tyler's condition stabilized. "It's likely just inflammation from the increased activity," she reassured Mason, "but with his history, I'd prefer we rule out any complications." The delay meant adjusting their counter-strategy timeline. Mason contacted Daniel and Olivia immediately, and they agreed to proceed with the legal and corporate aspects while delaying the personal statement and footage release until Mason and Tyler could return home. What none of them anticipated was Victoria's ability to adapt. Whether through her own sources or simply keen intuition, she sensed the shifting dynamics and accelerated her plans. By Saturday afternoon, her exclusive interview with a sympathetic journalist had already been published online, portraying her as the devoted stepmother forced to flee an emotionally volatile household where her attempts to properly care for her disabled stepson were met with irrational anger from a controlling tech mogul. The article was cunningly crafted, mixing just enough truth with the lies to create a plausible narrative. It referenced Mason's extended absence from Parker Tech, his sudden decision to reclaim their former family home, and included quotes from unnamed household staff describing his allegedly erratic behavior. Most cunningly, it portrayed Victoria as having genuine concern for Tyler's welfare, suggesting that Mason's smothering attention was hindering the boy's development of independence. Mason received the news while sitting beside Tyler's hospital bed, watching his son sleep fitfully after a round of tests and medications. The contrast between the peaceful, vulnerable child before him and Victoria's poisonous characterization created a surge of anger that he carefully contained. Unwilling to disturb Tyler's rest, he stepped into the hallway to call Olivia. "Move forward with everything immediately," he instructed quietly. "Release the real footage to counter her narrative before it gains more traction. Are you certain? Olivia asked. This accelerated timeline means we won't be able to blur Tyler's face in all instances. There simply isn't time for that level of editing. Mason hesitated, remembering his promise to protect Tyler's privacy. But the alternative, allowing Victoria's lies to stand unchallenged for even a few more days, seemed worse. Do what you can to protect his identity, but the truth needs to come out now. And Liv? Make sure the board sees everything before it goes public. I want Montgomery to know exactly what kind of person he's been conspiring with. The release of the authentic security footage created an immediate media firestorm. The stark contrast between Victoria's polished public persona and the cold cruelty captured on video was shocking even to those who had suspected her sincerity. Particularly damning was footage of her deliberately moving Tyler's wheelchair beyond his reach as punishment for interrupting one of her phone calls, leaving him stranded on the floor for over an hour while she continued her conversation in another room. Public sentiment shifted dramatically as the evidence mounted. Victoria's carefully constructed image crumbled under the weight of undeniable visual proof, while Parker Tech's stock recovered from its temporary downturn as investors recognized the coordinated attack for what it was. Maxwell Richards issued an immediate denial of any involvement, claiming that his meetings with Victoria had been merely social, and that any business discussions with Montgomery were routine industry networking. But the emails obtained from Robert told a different story, one that federal investigators found sufficiently compelling to open a formal investigation into potential securities fraud and corporate espionage. In Boston, Mason monitored these developments while maintaining his focus on Tyler, whose fever had finally broken after a tense 24 hours. As the boy gradually regained his energy, Mason carefully explained the current situation. A lot of people are talking about our family right now, he said gently. The videos of Victoria were released, and many people are upset about how she treated you. Tyler absorbed this information with surprising equanimity. Are they mad at you too, for not knowing what was happening? The question cut straight to Mason's deepest guilt. Some might be, he acknowledged. And they wouldn't be wrong. I should have protected you better. Tyler considered this, then reached for Mason's hand with solemn intent. But you're protecting me now, and you didn't know because I didn't tell you. Victoria said you wouldn't believe me, and I was scared. I will always believe you, Tyler, Mason promised, squeezing his son's hand gently. From now on, no matter what anyone says. Their conversation was interrupted by a nurse bringing Tyler's lunch and news that Dr. Chen had cleared him for discharge the following morning. The prospect of returning home lightened the atmosphere considerably, with Tyler eagerly listing all the things he wanted to do in their renovated house and restored garden. As Tyler ate, Mason stepped into the hallway to check his messages and found one from an unexpected source, Eliza Howard, host of Greenwich Confidential, requesting an exclusive interview with both Mason and Tyler to set the record straight. Mason's initial instinct was to refuse outright. Tyler had been exposed enough already. But he remembered his son's earlier words about wanting to help tell their story, about combating the assumption that a child's account would be automatically discounted against an adult's denial. When he carefully broached the subject with Tyler, explaining who Eliza was and what an interview would entail, the boy's response was immediate and certain. I want to do it, he said firmly. Not because I want people to feel sorry for me, but because Victoria shouldn't get to tell lies about us anymore. Recognizing the healing potential in reclaiming their narrative, Mason agreed to the interview with specific conditions. It would take place in their home once they returned from Boston. Tyler could end the conversation at any point if he became uncomfortable, and Mason would review all questions in advance. As they prepared for discharge the next morning, Tyler practicing with his new forearm crutches under Dr. Chen's supervision, Mason felt a complex mixture of emotions. The public exposure of their private trauma was painful, yet somehow cathartic, stripping away the layers of deception that Victoria had wrapped around their family. Whatever came next, the interview, the ongoing legal proceedings against Victoria and her co-conspirators, the restructuring of Parker Tech, they would face it together, with the honesty and communication that had been absent for too long. What neither of them realized was that Victoria had one final card to play, a desperate gambit born of humiliation and rage that would bring their conflict to its ultimate climax. As Mason helped Tyler pack his belongings, Victoria was already en route to Connecticut, determined to confront them upon their return with revelations she believed would shatter the newfound peace between father and son forever. The journey back to Greenwich felt symbolic, a return not just to a physical place, but to the foundations that had once anchored the Parker family. Mason drove with Tyler beside him in the specially equipped SUV, the coastal highway unfurling before them like a path into their reclaimed future. After weeks in Boston's medical environment, the simple pleasure of travel filled Tyler with visible excitement. His face pressed against the window as he catalogued familiar landmarks along the route. "Look, Dad, the lighthouse where Mom and I used to count seagulls," Tyler pointed enthusiastically as they passed a white stone structure perched on rocky cliffs. "She said if we counted 100, we'd have good luck for a week." Mason smiled at the memory, heartwarming at Tyler's increasingly frequent mentions of Emily, without the shadow of pain that had once accompanied them. "Did you ever reach 100? Tyler laughed, the sound lighter and more carefree than Mason had heard in years. "No way, the most we ever got was 67. Mom said that was enough for 4 days of good luck. And we should save some luck for other people anyway." These organic connections to Emily, shared without Victoria's toxic restrictions, felt like recovery of something precious that had been deliberately buried. Throughout the trip, Tyler continued this pattern, weaving memories of his mother into observations about the passing scenery, each recollection strengthening the bridge between their past and present. As they approached the outskirts of Greenwich, Mason's phone buzzed with a message from Margaret. "House ready. Garden planted. But there's something you should know before you arrive." Before he could call for clarification, Tyler's excitement at seeing their old neighborhood demanded his attention. The modest colonial house looked both familiar and transformed as they pulled into the driveway. The exterior maintained its traditional charm, but new additions, a gently sloping ramp replacing the front steps, widened doorways, and strategically placed handrails, subtly integrated accessibility without sacrificing the home's character. Flower boxes burst with Emily's favorite purple hydrangeas, a thoughtful touch from Margaret that brought unexpected moisture to Mason's eyes. "It looks like home again," Tyler whispered, a world of meaning in those simple words. Mason helped Tyler transfer to his wheelchair, noting with pride how much more adept his son had become at managing the transition. As they approached the front door, Margaret appeared on the porch, her expression a conflicted mixture of welcome and concern. "Welcome home, both of you," she greeted them warmly, embracing Tyler first and then Mason. "Everything is ready inside. But," she hesitated, glancing meaningfully at Mason, "there's been a development. Robert Wilson called an hour ago. Victoria was seen in town this morning and she was making threats." Mason nodded slightly, understanding Margaret's reluctance to elaborate in front of Tyler. "We'll discuss it later," he murmured, focusing instead on the homecoming moment. "Right now I think someone is eager to see his room." Tyler wheeled himself up the ramp with newfound confidence, pausing at the threshold as memories washed over him. "It even smells the same," he observed wonderingly. "Like Mom's lemon cookies and the wood polish she liked." Margaret smiled, visibly touched by the observation. "I might have baked a batch of Emily's cookies this morning. They're cooling in the kitchen, if you'd like to test whether I got the recipe right." While Tyler eagerly headed toward the kitchen with Margaret, Mason quickly checked his phone for details on Robert's warning. The text message was brief but alarming. "V claiming to have truth that will turn T against you, possibly headed to your house. Richard's distancing himself from her. She's increasingly unstable." The prospect of Victoria disrupting their homecoming sent a surge of protective anger through Mason. After all Tyler had endured, and the progress he'd made, the last thing he needed was another traumatic confrontation. Mason quickly texted Olivia to arrange for additional security and to ensure the restraining order was being actively enforced. Pushing these concerns temporarily aside, he joined Tyler in the kitchen, where his son was thoughtfully evaluating a fresh-baked cookie. "Almost right," Tyler declared seriously, "but Mom put a tiny bit more lemon. And she always said the secret was in how long you beat the butter." Margaret laughed delightedly. Well, you'll have to supervise my technique next time. Now, would you like to see what we've done with your room? Mr. Parker gave specific instructions about keeping your favorite elements while making some new additions. The tour of the renovated house became a journey through carefully preserved memories, enhanced by thoughtful adaptations. Tyler's room maintained his beloved space-themed decor, now complemented by a state-of-the-art adjustable bed and a specially designed desk that accommodated his wheelchair perfectly. The bathroom featured subtle support rails, disguised as part of the nautical theme Emily had originally created, maintaining the playful atmosphere while adding necessary functionality. Most significant was the sunroom addition that connected to the backyard garden. Designed with floor-to-ceiling windows and wide doorways, it provided Tyler with an all-weather connection to the outdoor space that had once been central to family activities. "And here's what I think you'll find most exciting," Margaret announced as she led them through the sunroom doors onto a wide deck that overlooked the garden. Emily's garden, reimagined for your easy access. The raised garden beds were arranged in a pattern that allowed wheelchair navigation between them, with varying heights that would permit Tyler to tend different plants from either his chair or standing with support. A small greenhouse stood at the far end, its door wide enough for wheelchair access and its interior shelves at carefully calibrated heights. "This is amazing," Tyler breathed, wheeling himself along the smooth pathway between the beds. "Look, Dad!" Margaret planted Mom's tomatoes and those purple beans we used to grow. Mason knelt beside Tyler's wheelchair, pointing out additional features. "See these lower beds? They're at the perfect height for when you're practicing standing with your crutches. And over there we've installed an irrigation system you can control from an app, something your mom would have loved." As Tyler explored the garden with Margaret's guidance, Mason stepped back into the sunroom to check his messages again. Olivia had confirmed that security would be monitoring the property perimeter, and the local police had been notified about the restraining order in case Victoria attempted to approach. The peace of their homecoming remained undisturbed through the afternoon as they settled in, unpacking Tyler's belongings and arranging his therapy equipment in the converted den. They shared a simple dinner on the back deck, watching fireflies emerge in the gathering twilight, a perfect conclusion to their first day home. It was as Mason was helping Tyler prepare for bed, the boy drowsy with contentment and the fatigue of travel, that the doorbell rang with insistent urgency. Mason tensed immediately, exchanging a concerned glance with Margaret, who appeared in the doorway. "I'll see who it is," she offered quietly. "Security should have stopped anyone at the gate." "No," Mason replied, carefully tucking the blanket around Tyler. "I'll go. Stay with him, please." The persistent ringing had changed to pounding by the time Mason reached the front door. Through the sidelight window, he could see Victoria, her normally perfect appearance disheveled, her expression a mask of desperate fury. Behind her on the driveway stood a security officer, apologetically indicating he had tried to stop her as she rushed past the property gate. Mason opened the door but remained firmly in the threshold, blocking entry. "You're violating a restraining order, Victoria. Leave now, or I'll have no choice but to call the police." Victoria's laugh held an edge of hysteria. "Always so proper, Mason. So concerned with appearances and legal niceties while building your life on lies. Whatever you have to say, this isn't the time or place," Mason replied evenly, acutely aware of Tyler possibly overhearing. "Tyler is settled in for the night and I won't have you disturbing him. Tyler deserves to know the truth about his saintly mother," Victoria spat, her voice rising, "about the real reason for the accident that convenient day when Emily just happened to be driving on that particular road." The implication sent ice through Mason's veins. "What are you talking about?" Victoria's smile turned vicious. "Did you ever wonder why Emily was on that country road, so far from the usual route home from Tyler's school? I found her emails. Mason, the ones she was exchanging with her colleague James Peterson, planning their little rendezvous at that charming bed and breakfast by the lake." The accusation hung in the air between them, Victoria's eyes gleaming with triumph as she delivered what she clearly believed would be a devastating blow. Your perfect Emily was having an affair. She was on that road because she was meeting her lover. Tyler lost his ability to walk because his mother couldn't keep her marriage vows. Mason stared at her, momentarily speechless, Not from shock or betrayal, but from the breathtaking malice behind Victoria's final attempt to damage his family. When he finally spoke, his voice was unnaturally calm. James Peterson was Emily's research partner on a pediatric mobility study. They were presenting their findings at a medical conference being held at the lakeside resort. I was supposed to meet them there for the presentation, but I was delayed in California. Victoria's vindictive smile faltered. You're lying. The emails were about their research presentation, Mason finished for her. I have copies of all Emily's professional correspondence. She and James were developing an innovative therapy approach for children with partial mobility impairment work that Dr. Chen is now continuing with Tyler. The confidence in Mason's response clearly wasn't what Victoria had anticipated. She rallied quickly, changing tactics. It doesn't matter. Your perfect family image is already shattered. Everyone knows you failed to protect your son from me. Your company is under investigation. Your precious reputation. Mom wasn't perfect, came a small, clear voice from behind Mason, but she was good and kind, and she loved us. Mason turned to find Tyler in the hallway, balanced carefully on his forearm crutches, Margaret hovering protectively behind him. The boy's face was solemn but remarkably composed as he regarded Victoria. Tyler, Mason began, concerned about his son's exposure to this ugliness, but Tyler shook his head slightly. It's okay. Dad, I want to say something. With deliberate care, Tyler took a step forward, the weeks of intensive therapy evident in his improved balance and control. Victoria, you tried to make me forget Mom. You said remembering her made Dad sad, but that wasn't true. You just didn't want me to remember what having a real mom felt like. The simple truth, delivered with a child's clarity, seemed to deflate Victoria's vengeful energy. She stared at Tyler, at the evidence of his progress and the calm certainty in his young face. You took my wheelchair and left me on the floor, Tyler continued quietly. You said it was to make me stronger, but it wasn't. It was because you were angry and wanted to hurt me. Real parents don't hurt their kids when they're angry. Mason placed a gentle hand on Tyler's shoulder, overwhelmed with pride at his son's composure and insight. That's enough, buddy. You've said what needed saying. Margaret will help you back to bed while I finish talking to Victoria. As Margaret carefully guided Tyler back down the hallway, Mason turned to Victoria, whose facade had completely crumbled, leaving only the hollow shell of her manufactured persona. You've lost, Victoria, not because of the videos or the legal consequences, but because you never understood what you were fighting against. This family isn't perfect, it's real. It's built on love and honesty, even through mistakes and grief. That's something you can't destroy with lies or manipulation. Victoria seemed to physically shrink before him, her calculated poise replaced by genuine desperation. You have no idea what it's like to be discarded, to be treated as disposable. I was just a convenient replacement for your perfect family picture. For the first time, Mason glimpsed the wounded core beneath Victoria's cruelty, not with sympathy, but with clarity. You were never a replacement, Victoria. You were a partner, or you could have been, but you chose to see Tyler as competition rather than as a child who needed love. That was your decision, not ours. He stepped back, preparing to close the door. Security will escort you off the property. If you attempt to contact Tyler or me again, directly or through the media, the restraining order will be extended and enforced to the fullest extent. Whatever happens next, with the investigations and legal proceedings, I suggest you focus on building a life that doesn't depend on destroying others. As he closed the door on Victoria's defeated expression, Mason felt an unexpected sense of closure. Her final attack, meant to shatter their healing family bond, had instead reinforced it through Tyler's brave stand and clear-eyed understanding. He found Tyler sitting on the edge of his bed, still processing the confrontation. You did really well out there, Mason said, sitting beside him. That was very brave. Tyler leaned against his father's shoulder. I wasn't scared of her this time. She can't hurt us anymore, right? Right, Mason confirmed, wrapping an arm around his son's shoulders. Victoria made her choices, and now she has to live with the consequences. But we get to make new choices every day about how we want to live and who we want to be. Like Mom's garden, Tyler mused thoughtfully. We're planting new things, but we're still keeping the special plants she loved. The insight, so perfectly expressed in 7-year-old terms, captured exactly what they were doing, honoring Emily's memory while building something new that incorporated their experiences, even the painful ones. That's exactly right, buddy. We're growing something new from what we've always had. The following weeks brought a gradual return to normalcy, or rather, the establishment of a new normal that balanced Tyler's ongoing therapy with Mason's restructured role at Parker Tech. True to his commitment, Mason arranged his schedule around Tyler's needs, working primarily from the home office and limiting travel to day trips when possible. The legal consequences for Victoria and her co-conspirators unfolded with methodical precision. Federal investigators uncovered extensive evidence of corporate espionage, resulting in criminal charges against Maxwell Richards and civil penalties for rich tech industries. Victoria herself faced charges related to computer fraud and obstruction of justice, eventually accepting a plea deal that included probation and community service, with organizations supporting children with disabilities, a particularly fitting consequence that Tyler, with his innate sense of justice, approved. Wesley Montgomery resigned from Parker Tech's board following the revelation of his involvement, though he maintained that he had been unaware of the full extent of Victoria and Richard's plans. The board underwent significant restructuring, with Daniel permanently assuming many of Mason's former operational responsibilities, while Mason focused on strategic vision and innovation, a division of labor that ultimately strengthened the company. The interview with Eliza Howard took place as planned, conducted in the Parker family garden on a perfect autumn afternoon. Tyler, seated beside his father, spoke with remarkable poise about his experiences with Victoria and his ongoing recovery journey. Rather than dwelling on the negative aspects, he emphasized the progress he was making with his new therapy program and his excitement about returning to a regular school in the coming semester. "The most important thing I learned," he told Eliza with the disarming directness of childhood, "is that it's okay to tell someone when bad things are happening. I was afraid to tell my dad because Victoria said he wouldn't believe me. But that wasn't true. Parents should believe their kids." The interview, when it aired, generated an outpouring of support for the Parkers and sparked important conversations about recognizing signs of emotional abuse in blended families. Several child welfare organizations reached out to Mason about developing programs to help children better understand and communicate their experiences in difficult family situations. 6 months after their return from Boston, Tyler achieved a milestone that once seemed impossible, walking the length of the garden path using only his forearm crutches without assistance. Mason recorded the moment on video, capturing Tyler's face as he reached the greenhouse door, a mixture of triumph, determination, and joy that encapsulated their journey from darkness back into light. That evening, as they sat on the deck watching the sunset, Tyler asked a question that had clearly been on his mind. "Dad, do you think Mom can see how I'm doing now?" Mason considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "I believe she can. And I think she's incredibly proud of you. Not just because you're walking more, but because of the kind of person you're becoming. Strong, brave, and compassionate, just like she was." Tyler nodded, satisfied with the answer. "I think she's proud of you, too. For fixing things and for being here with me instead of always at work." The simple observation held profound truth. Through all the challenges they had faced, Emily's loss, Victoria's betrayal, the corporate machinations, and Tyler's physical struggles, they had ultimately found their way back to what mattered most, the unbreakable bond between parent and child, strengthened rather than diminished by adversity. As stars began appearing in the darkening sky, Tyler pointed upward with the same excitement he had shown as a toddler. "Look, Dad, the first star. Mom always said that's where wishes come from. Do you have a wish?" Mason asked, following his son's gaze to the evening's first brilliant point of light. Tyler smiled, the peaceful confidence in his expression, reflecting how far they had come from the frightened, withdrawn child Victoria had cultivated. "I don't need to wish anymore. We already have everything important." In that moment of perfect understanding, Mason recognized the profound truth in his son's words. Through all the wealth, success, and status he had pursued, the most valuable treasure had been beside him all along, not in the perfect family image Victoria had tried to manufacture, but in the real imperfect, loving connection he shared with his son. As they counted stars together, continuing Emily's tradition in their reclaimed home, Mason silently thanked whatever twist of fate had brought him home early, on that pivotal day to witness Victoria's true nature. That moment of painful clarity had set them on the path to healing and authentic connection that no amount of success or status could have provided. The garden Emily had loved now flourished under their combined care, with Tyler's section showing the same meticulous attention to detail that had characterized his mother's approach. New plants grew alongside preserved favorites, creating a living metaphor for the family they had become, honoring the past while embracing a future shaped by both joy and sorrow, strength forged through adversity, and love that continued to grow in the most challenging soil. Together, father and son had learned that true family wasn't defined by perfect appearances or society's expectations, but by the choice to stand together through life's darkest moments, supporting each other with unwavering commitment and boundless love. And in that essential truth, they had found not just recovery but genuine transformation, emerging stronger, wiser, and more deeply connected than they had ever been before.